I'm Carla, and this is my 10-minute talk on my action research project for educational research. My study is currently taking place at a K-8 school in northern Vermont, where I am a first-year special educator focused on math in grades 3-4. The school where I work is moving steadily toward an inclusive co-teaching model of special education. That means that rather than segregating students with disabilities into special classes or pulling them out of class for instruction, all students are educated in general education classrooms together. Special educators and general educators co-plan and co-teach using principles of universal design for learning, in addition to modifying or adapting content as needed. As part of my literature review, I surveyed several articles that explored best practices for co-teaching and the benefits of inclusion for all students, those with and without disabilities. And a lot of times people can understand why co-teaching and inclusion are good if you're talking about a student with a specific learning disability who learns a little bit differently, bringing in their ways of learning, whether it's by using manipulatives or having audio versions of things rather than just written versions. That can really, people can easily see how that can benefit all students. But sometimes people have a hard time thinking about inclusion when we're talking about students with severe special needs. But I believe inclusion can work for all students, and it's a philosophy I feel strongly about. So I knew that one of my projects should aim to make inclusion better for one of those students. And the student I chose to focus on for the study I'll call James. James is in one of my third grade math classes, and he's also on my special education caseload. He has a primary disability category of autism spectrum disorder, and he also suffers from epilepsy and has many seizures daily. James' math teacher and I were concerned about him right from the start because neither of us had had experience working with a student with such intensive needs as James. And we didn't feel like his presence in math class at the beginning of the year was truly inclusive. He was just kind of there. So I decided James would be a good focus for my action research project. And the question that's guiding my project is, how can I improve my practice as evidenced by James increasing the amount of time spent meaningfully engaged in his third grade inclusive math class? My literature turned up an intriguing way to increase the effectiveness for students of including students with severe special needs, called the Beyond Access Framework. The framework relies on examining the routines of the classroom and determining how the student with severe special needs can fit into those routines. This framework was appealing to me because each 90-minute math block is built on routines. The students every day have a warm-up, they have a guided mini lesson, they have guided practice. At the end of class, they share their math thinking, they do an exit ticket, they have some kind of conclusion. So there's naturally routines built right into the math block. Additionally, James really thrives with routines, and he learns best when he is doing something that is a routine. So building routines for James within the routines of the class seemed like a natural fit and a good way to better include James. So once I had this idea, I needed to determine how to implement my objective. And I did this by first identifying my objective, my two objectives. The first objective was to operationally define what meaningful engagement is. And the importance of that really cannot be overstated. Just as IEP goals must be specific and measurable, so must, the objects of your study. I can recall this summer working on a project with a group in which we had to determine whether the undergraduate classes at Johnson State College adequately attended to issues of diversity, and my partner simply wanted to use his gut feelings to decide whether diversity was being taught. But really, you have to define what it is. You need a framework. You need to be able to tell. I can't simply rely on a gut feeling to determine whether James is meaningfully engaged in math. If I did that, every moment would be open to my interpretation, and my interpretation may be very different from that of another teacher, and therefore not reliable. So I defined what meaningful engagement is. And my definition, 2 criteria must be met to say that James is meaningfully engaged in his math class. The first is that he has to be physically present in the math class during the math period. There are times throughout the day where we study math. For instance, I have tea with James 3 days a week for 20 minutes so we can practice counting and word problems with authentic objects. And that is wonderful, and it is math, but it is not meaningfully engaged in math class, in the inclusive math class. So criteria 1 is it takes place in the math class. He's actually there. Secondly, he must either be working on the predetermined routine that was planned by me and or the general educator, or he must be interacting with a teacher or peer. And James does not currently do any math independently at all, and does need prompting even for counting, so that does not need to be considered in my definition. So I said that if those 2 criteria were met, we can say that James is meaningfully engaged. Once I knew what meaningful engagement was, I was ready to start my research and gather some baseline data. And the 3 sets of data I'm working on are whole interval recording, field notes, and notes from planning sessions with the general educator. For the whole interval recording, before the intervention, I simply made note of what James was doing and whether it qualified as meaningful engagement every 5 minutes throughout the math block. I gathered the data for a week prior to the intervention. Upon doing this, I found that James was meaningfully engaged in math class only about 20% of the time. At this time today, December 15th, the intervention is only partially in place. We have developed a calendar routine for James, a greeting routine, a calendar routine, and a Balavisex routine, and that's a physical therapy type routine that the whole class can participate in. That happens, it's kind of like a motor break for the class. And even though that's not specifically math oriented, it is a routine that we developed, and James is physically present, so that qualifies as being meaningfully engaged. I am still taking data at this point, but the full intervention won't be implemented until after break, and I will take data to determine the difference between the pre-intervention time, when James was 20% engaged, and the post-intervention, when he is hopefully much more engaged. Taking notes on the planning sessions gave me a lot to think about, because admittedly some of our planning sessions were thwarted by off-topic conversation. I wonder, is that something that should be mentioned in a research report? I'm thinking not, but it is instructive to realize that these studies all involved imperfect people and imperfect situations, and all of that affects what we do every day. For the field notes, I remembered from my educational research class that field notes should simply be factual observations recorded without commentary on their value or what they mean. The interpretation can come later. So for instance, when I observed James scribbling maniacally on his paper with a crayon, I just wrote James is scribbling with a crayon. I did not write James is wasting his educational time by scribbling when he should be meaningfully engaged in math class. So I'm hopeful that this action research study will help me learn how to conduct studies in the future, which can benefit my students and help me be a better teacher. And I'm hopeful that this study will result in James being much more meaningfully engaged in class, so he can benefit from the academic instruction and also the vast social opportunities that arise from being part of the class instead of an outsider. I'm still working on my research, and I look forward to completing it and writing my paper. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.